What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them.
Yep.
In the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yep.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at meals and asks me meals questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the meal that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy. And a big part of that is related to Canine Paradigm. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Paradigm and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
Check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined today by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
Hello, sir.
How are you?
New year, new me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm totally a new person. I'm
Yep.
going to succeed at all the things I've failed at. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to be more organized. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to do all those things for the next week, maybe.
As soon as January 1st comes over, everything that happened from December 31st backwards, it just washes away all your sins.
Yeah. I saw a really funny cartoon the other day with, the little two aliens talking to each other about how in 3 days I'm going to radically change my life. And he's like, well, why don't you do it today? It's like, oh no, I have to wait those 3 days.
Exactly.
So should we really ramp things up over those 3 days to make it even harder when at this arbitrary point that you've said? He's like, oh yes, let's do that. Yes. Yeah. Hey, we should do some dog stuff. Talk about some dog stuff.
Yeah, I want to talk about a subject on what people consider to be a tough dog.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This has come up over multiple times. It was inspired by a lesson I did not long ago. And of course, when you're talking about things like this, people's names and people's dogs and their identities need to be protected unless they want to publicly speak about them. And a lot of people don't when I'm talking in private consults with people, which is fair enough as well. But I want to reflect back and talk about my interpretations of what a tough dog was and how that's radically changed over the years that I've now been involved in dog training and dog sports and helping people with dogs and selection criteria of puppies into growing dogs. Because when I first got into it, which were the early ADT days, my interpretation of a tough dog at the start was a dog that made a lot of noise, a dog that showed a lot of teeth. I was very impressionable at the time. I thought that was the poster child of what a tough dog was. In some cases it is. Sometimes that dog can be a very tough dog. Sometimes that dog can be extremely robust. It doesn't mean that a dog that has all that criteria is not the type of dog that isn't a formable type of dog. Where I think I got it wrong was I thought that if the dog was showing aggression to other dogs, that was very dominant. If the dog was barking and showing a lot of teeth and squealing and doing all those sort of things, that it was a very high in drive and very high possessive type of dog. I came to realize that a lot of these attributes that I was signaling as something of virtue in a dog was not desirable at all. Take, for example, if you've got a dog that it's a problem around other dogs, for argument's sake, like you've got a dog that has medium to high aggression around other dogs as a working dog or a sporting dog or anything like that. We have discussed this in past episodes where we've talked about how useless that actually is.
Yeah.
It's nothing but a complete and utter hindrance. And I remember, as I've been thinking about times that I did street work with Harley when I was doing a lot of security work, there were people that used to threaten me that they'd go home and get their dogs, or were walking up to me with another dog, trying to provoke aggression from Harley. And Harley wasn't dog aggressive at all. In fact, out of all of my dogs, he was one of the most social dogs that I've ever had. Like, he would play with anyone. He didn't want to be aggressive. Even in cases where other dogs attacked him, he would look to me as if, say, hey, sort this out for me, or I'm going to have to sort this out. If people hear this, they would probably say, yeah, right, dude, you're talking a load of shit. You're just talking your dog up. One thing that I can say, again, which I've said in comments before, you weren't there. You weren't around when this was happening. And I did have eyewitnesses when he was publicly attacked at a training center. All he did was sat and he looked at me, growling at the other dog, but looked at me. And I specifically said to the other person, get your dog off. And he was trying to get his dog off. He was fumbling. So I got Harley to pin his dog down so he could actually get it. When he was able to retrieve his dog, I outed Harley off his dog and called him back to me. And there was no less than 50 people at the training center watching that. I had legitimate eyes on. We don't have video like we did these days. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have recording. You know, you weren't recording everything that you were doing from taking a shit in the morning upwards like we do now. We just didn't have the capability to do that. But I had people at the training center who watched that and were saying, how the fuck did you get him to do that? The reason I got him to do that is because he wasn't dog aggressive. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to be in the fight with another dog. That wasn't ideal to him at all. And if you're saying to me, how did you do it? I couldn't really tell you because I didn't understand enough about dog training at the time to be able to take credit for it. I think largely it was just the genetics of him. Harley was, it's very easy for you to say this when he's been dead for many years and he's gone, but Harley was the epitome of what a true tough dog was. He was very sound in his body. He was very, very sound in his mind. He was very trainable. You could train him into a style and then train him out of that style into another style, and he was very adaptive into what he did. But I didn't know that. I didn't understand that truly until after I had better education. I was more informed about what dogs were, and I started then to be able to compare him to what I thought I admired more in other dogs and didn't admire in him. In fact, I would probably go further to tell you that I thought he had weaknesses in him because he didn't have some of these attributes that I looked up to in other dogs, but I was misinformed about those. An important part of my mentality and my education and my pastime came from identifying what I thought was really cool and very visual, because I wanted Harley to be showing much more teeth because he didn't do that. There were certainly, and I do have images of him showing a lot of teeth and showing good aggression when he was snapped in those pictures. But you can get a barking dog to do that. With technology today, even some of the softest dogs in the world, if they're barking, you can make them look visually aggressive.
Yeah, if you catch the right moment.
If you catch the right moment. When we were doing agitation with Harley, he was certainly rising to the occasion, but he wouldn't show teeth and he wouldn't come out as much as other dogs. And when I would look at that, I would think, oh, I'm disappointed with that. I wish he would be more visual. The real fact is he never needed to be. He didn't want to try and intimidate you away from him. He wanted you to come over to him so you would feel more confident to approach him. And then he was literally like a viper and he'd just grab you and start wailing into you from that. If I look back on what he was doing then, he was one of the most outstanding dogs that I'd ever had the privilege to share my life with, as opposed to some of the other dogs who were my poster childs of what a tough dog was, who weren't that type of dog at all, who were thin-nerved, who made a lot of noise. It was like the saying that we used to say quite a lot of time in pubs when people were performing and making a lot of noise is hollow vessels make the most sound, or drums make the most noise. To give you an example of that, there was a German Shepherd that was at the club. Like, he would be quite visually striking when he was showing defensive aggression towards you. And he was a good biting dog and so forth. But if you look deeper into it and you examine what was going on, this dog was very easy to overload. Even while he was on the arm, like he would start sounding off and he'd start making a lot of high-pitched whining and so forth. There were times where the dog would slip out of the bite because he wasn't comfortable in what he was doing. He wasn't really the correct aptitude in the dog, or he was pushed too hard from decoys that were training him at the time. So my uneducated, youthful way of looking at that dog was that was a hard dog. But then I sort of came around to realizing, no, he's not. He's a dog that whenever there's any sort of pressure on him, he's looking for an exit. He's looking for a way to get out of that sort of situation. I also want to add to this conversation that when I've been in other conversations, either with people who are doing consults with me or I'm speaking to other people training dogs, there is an interpretation of, in order to get this toughness out of dogs, you have to allow the dog to be so obnoxious in its behaviors during its youth that the dog is primarily allowed to do anything it wants to do in the home. And even though I have some thoughts and some raising techniques of my own where I let my dogs be a little bit more rowdy and I don't put so many restrictions on them, there are certain things that I will not allow. For example, my dog showing aggression back to me, or even prey locking on me or biting me in any of those sort of situations. That is absolutely not allowed to happen. And I have had other trainers where they're saying they're only puppies, just ignore it, we'll fix this up in time, where it's escalated into a real problem in the home for people, where it's not only become a safety issue for them, but it's also become an extended safety issue to their family and friends as well, because this dog has no boundaries at home. It believes that this is acceptable behavior and it's allowed to do it. My advice to people is, no, it's not. It's not acceptable for a dog to do those sort of things. There are plenty of things that dogs can play with, and there are plenty of outlets that dogs can have. It shouldn't be on you, your partner, your children, your neighbors, your friends coming around, because this is going to escalate into dangerous territory. These are not tough dogs, and this is not good advice for budding decoys, budding training directors, intermediate or very experienced people to be giving. I would certainly be politely questioning that and asking them why they think that that is acceptable behavior to allow in the house. That's not tough dog raising. That's not bringing a dog up in the best interest of you. There are plenty of other things that you can do to have the dog be more robust and safe and still have good control and more appropriate behaviors in and around the house.
I think that's one of the sort of most misunderstood things in raising puppies is, especially in the working space, I think that we're constantly saying, don't correct that puppy, don't be too hard on it, don't close doors that you want open later. I think that is very true. It's then when you get into the sort of details of that is like, hey, there are certain doors that that's a very different door from what you're thinking. When we say those kinds of things, we mean don't stop a dog from barking completely as a puppy. Like there's times where it's appropriate to bark and there's times where it's inappropriate to bark. But if you convince a puppy that it shouldn't bark at all, then you might have a hard time getting a bark from it older, where if you want that from the dog. And then I think next step after that is we talk about puppies biting stuff in the home. How does a 12-week-old puppy distinguish the difference between the bite pillow that you're trying to get it to bite and the little linen or jute or whatever it is pillow that you want it to bite, and the pillow in your home that is on the floor that is available to the dog as he walks through, or the towel that is hanging from the line that is in his space? My favorite tool to use on a puppy that 8 to 12 weeks old is a towel. That's what I use to sort of set the grip. It's actually a nappy, but just a little square towel that I then tape up. And I really like that because I can wrap it really tight. I can fold it over. I can turn it into something substantial, but then I can also have it just very loose and be just a very easy rag that I can get a lot of prey type movement from. So, of course, if someone comes to me and I'm using a towel in order to bring that prey and bring that excitement and convince that dog to put its teeth onto it and bite it, and not just bite it, but really bite and hold on and endure some difficulty in order to do that, of course, it's reasonable that when you're at home, that exact same piece of equipment, like not the same item individually, but the same thing, a towel hanging off of the line or hanging off of, people might have the puppies in the kitchen, as a place where the tea towel is hanging off of or the dish towel is hanging off of the oven handle.
Absolutely.
And of course, the puppy's going to go over and bite that. And those are the times where we then say, no, don't correct that. Don't necessarily let him do it. Redirect that into something else. And now we can have the conversation about redirecting. That's one of my favorite things, is when we often hear that quite a lot from dog trainers who haven't raised a puppy that's got a lot of oomph in it, and they constantly telling people, oh, just redirect that. The complaint from the puppy owner is, oh, he's biting me and he's tearing up my socks. He's got me by the pants. And we always say, oh, just redirect that. And it's like, that doesn't happen as easily as you think, right? If you've been bitten significantly in the pants, right, by like a 12-week-old puppy, and it's got those little razor sharp teeth in it.
Milk teeth.
It's just eyed you up and your pants moved in a way where it decided like, yep, okay, I'm biting that as hard as I possibly can. Your reaction to that is going to reinforce that 1,000,000%. And then the puppy's going to be coming after you. And when you're frantically pull out the little tug or whatever it is that your trainer has told you to have in your pocket and try and offer that to the dog, there's not a fucking chance he's going to take that. Like, you're going to have to choke him off of yourself in order to redirect him. Like, it's not just here, redirect into this toy. For certain dogs, that can be quite the ordeal. But getting back to what I was saying, those are the times to redirect. When the puppy is biting into something or acting in a way where we go, okay, that for sure is a behavior or a trait, or that's the beginnings of something that I definitely do want to cultivate, right? Like, I definitely want you to express yourself in that way, just not in this time, in this place with that thing.
Yeah.
So that's how to redirect. But I think that people sort of get a bit stuck in that sometimes, especially when it's their first time raising a dog for a bite work thing, or not even necessarily bite work people. You get this a lot with just normal pet dog owners, that you don't want to diminish that dog too much. And so they are allowing that dog to bite them on the hands continually, to chase their kids around the house and all this kind of stuff. And so first of all, we then have to say, well, the fact that you even got into that situation is a failure of management. You really shouldn't have put yourself into a position of even having the puppy being able to do that. But of course, it's inevitable. Like, everybody fails at one point or another. Like, I've got a video of me being fucking terrorized by a puppy in here, that I was doing something, I was recording something, and I had it on a place just like, tethered. And when I went to unclip it, it just decided, fuck you, you're getting it. And I skeeved it one time, which only excited it even more. And then I had fun getting chased around by it, right? But eventually it caught me and I had to deal with that and then do all of the malarkey that comes along with the redirect. So like, I get it. It happens and it's always going to happen. But I think what we have sort of misinformed people, or a lot of people have maybe misunderstood. I'm not really sure where the blame lies, but I think that what we regularly see is people who allow puppies to bite them and their kids, or act completely inappropriately in a way that isn't actually the way that you're going to allow that puppy to act when it grows up. So we always say, don't close any doors that you're going to want open later on. But a door that you don't want open later on is that puppy furiously biting at you. And those kind of bites are not the kind of bites that we really want to cultivate anyway. The puppy sort of biting all over you, chainsawing all over your leg and trying to tear your pants apart while he's having a good time and he's getting into his prey aggression at that point and is really learning how to tear stuff up. It's totally inappropriate that they're doing it to you. And so those are the times when the redirection has to be forced of a kind, right? And I think that's one of the things that you don't often see very good tutorials or very good videos of people doing that, of how difficult that can actually be and how it can resemble a pretty significant correction in order to get a puppy to redirect at that point. But I think that so many people are sort of, because of how difficult it can be and because they're worried about closing doors, so many people can find themselves in a position where they're just getting beat up by their puppy and cultivating what really can be quite dangerous. It sort of goes in line with what we've talked about so many times with doing your own bite work and stuff. There's puppies or there's dogs that you can do that for, no problem. But there's others that you just don't want to rehearse the use of that neural pathway ever. And what you certainly don't want is when that puppy feels stressed or is concerned environmentally or anything like that, knowing that they can point aggression to you and that will solve their problem. And I think that's what we see quite a lot of people essentially creating dogs that will redirect under duress later, because they've allowed that sort of thing to happen young. And the reason they allowed it to happen is not because they thought it was a good idea, but because they didn't necessarily know any better, right? It's not that they chose for that to happen. It's that they're concerned about the outcomes of closing that door and, providing essentially what is a correction to a dog for biting someone. And I think one of the things that we sometimes see is that a lot of puppy mouthing and that kind of stuff, sometimes people say, I've got all these strategies, and people come to me and I as a trainer, no matter my method, there's people from the overly compulsive to the force-free that all will say similar kinds of things. I've got this method for stopping puppy mouthing. And overwhelmingly, the reason that it stops is because a dog grows out of it, right? That's one of the main reasons why puppies stop biting people, is they just grow out of doing that. But they're not going to grow out of it if they're getting success in doing it. The idea of a puppy growing out of, or any dog sort of growing out of mouthing you, is when they're not doing it with malicious intent, or if they're not necessarily in prey, it's just habit, sore teeth, they're looking for attention, that kind of stuff. And by non-reinforcement, i.e. by not engaging with it and ignoring it essentially, with certain low drive and non-bitey type dogs, that behavior will go extinct pretty quickly because it's not taking you anywhere. But with the majority of dogs, it's not going away by itself, right? The majority of dogs are going to enjoy that. And especially some of the advice that we see, the act as though it hurt really bad, reel back, yelp as though it hurt. Sure, there are for sure some breeds and some dogs that if you do that to them, that's it. They'll never bite you again because they thought they've damaged the relationship and all that kind of stuff. But those are few and far between. And they are not going to pan out to be good working dogs if that works to stop them, right? If you're a little puppy that you have intention of doing, even if it's not that you plan to do any bite sports, for the majority of people listening, they're not doing that. You want to do just cool stuff with their dog, but they, want to be able to play games and games of prey and tap into that sort of mental state. If you've got a dog that's capable of doing that and he's biting you and rattling into your pants and breaking skin, and you're reacting as though it hurt and yelping and reeling away, that's only going to excite most dogs. It's certainly good dogs anyway. If you've got a dog that is stopped by that, it's probably not going to pan out. It's very likely that's not a great dog that's not actually going to be successful at the things you want to do.
Yeah, well, those sort of things are just like a platter of reinforcement for the dog.
Yeah,
when it starts hearing or getting those things offered to it on a silver platter, to speak, the dog's kind of looking at it, goes, "How good's my life? I'm allowed to do anything I want, anytime I want, to anyone I want." And,
Yeah.
that's not the rules. That's not how it plays out. And I see that all too frequently, which is it signals problems. And one of the parts of the conversation I did want to circle back to is when you were talking about like having little puppies or even juvenile dogs who are grabbing you on the calf or the pants and having a riot of a time. And then you trying to get them off onto like a tug or their toy or your toy of option for them at the time. There's a problem with that where even if the dog does take it up, the dog is leveling up. It's kind of looking at it like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to get that. Then we start drawing in, as we were talking about the hermetic principles last week, then you're getting a real cause and effect sort of principle where the dog kind of realized once I initiate this game with you, you're going to frantically run around the house screaming, making all these noises, unpacking my toy box, which is exactly what I wanted you to do. So this is now the pathway to getting that to happen. If I want to play with a toy and you're sitting in your couch loafing out and you don't want to play with me, all I need to do is grab you on the shin or grab your clothes and start death rolling you. And then you're going to freak out, run around looking for that toy. And I get the toy. So what a fucking game this is. And people don't realize that because they don't understand the pathway that the dog is thinking in its mind. Like, I'm desperate to play with this toy. It's that time of night where I've got that energy. I want to play with the toy, but you're not reciprocating. You're not taking all the cues or the hints that I want to do. So now I've realized that I've got a pre-mac event to making this happen. I'm going to grab your pants and I'm going to grab you, on a nice fleshy part of your body, which will quickly get you up out of that chair because you're not moving too fast, fat boy. You're sitting there, like doing all these things. And the reason I know that is because it's happened to me before where I've realized, I'm the Muppet Show here. This is the dog training me. I'm getting schooled by my dog. And that's a very real thing. Dogs aren't motorbikes or they aren't inanimate objects. They've got brains in their heads and those neurons are firing. So we're always training our dogs. We've been telling clients this for years. You're always training your dogs. Your dogs are very observant. They're watching things that are going on in your house. They're seeing this role play playing out. They're realizing, that's the way to make this thing happen. Like, you've unintentionally pre-macked me, but you've pre-macked me nonetheless. This is the path. This is the way that it's got to happen.
How bad is it when you catch yourself being fucked around by a dog and you as a trainer who knows so much better when you find yourself falling into that trap? I remember one time I was in my garage and I was going to take this young dog. It was Fred. I still remember the dog. It was one of the shepherds from years ago. And I had him in the garage and he was interested in something under my car. Like, I'm not sure what was under there, but he was trying to get under there. And I was trying to walk out the gate. What I tend to like to do with young dogs is have them off leash in my home as much as possible, right? So that they get to sort of make mistakes and move around and then I can tell them what's right and wrong. So they're not like off leashes in there's no way to control them, but I'm not holding the leash. I like to give them as much freedom as I possibly can when I possibly can. So we're walking through the garage, the big common space of the garage. He decides he wants to have a look under my car. That's no worries. I'm going to meet you at the gate where we're going to leave and I'm going to pick up the leash and out we go. And then he got really interested in something under my car. So I sort of whistled to him and he doesn't come. And I get out, I've always got food, it's a puppy, right? And I get out food and I'm like, showing it to him and I'm like kind of calling him and trying to get him to come take his food, but he's more interested in what we're doing. And I had this moment where I was like, hang on, stop. What the fuck am I doing here? I'm the dog trainer. And this is the exact situation where if a client did this, I'd be telling them this is bribery. Like, you're offering the dog, hey, if you do this for me, I'll give you the treat, rather than positioning the situation where the dog does the thing and then you give it the treat, right? So it's actually reinforcement for what the dog did rather than bribery to do the thing. And like, that's the difference, right? And bribery, it can work to get through that situation, but it doesn't result in long-term learning. Well, it does result in long-term learning, but not the one that you want. It results in the opposite of, unless you've got the thing, I'm not doing the work. So like, I had this moment where I sort of was to myself and was like, hang on, you know better than this. You've got the food. He's under the car trying to get to something. You have the clicker. The clicker is supercharged. If you want him out from under there, just click. He'll come out. Then you can give him the food. And while he's eating that food, you can grab the leash and away you go, right? Like, no conflict. We don't need to be trying to convince him of anything. He's going to perform a reflex response. We could make an argument that I was reinforcing him being under there, but only if I didn't pick up the leash and let him go back to it would that be the case, right? Like, if I don't allow the dog to go back to the thing, I'm not actually reinforcing it. I'm redirecting the behavior and doing so in the sequence that allows the dog to have long-term learning about coming when he's called, right? I can say his name, I can click, and then I can give the food rather than being like, please, please come
out from under the car. Yeah, this is only a few years ago. Like I knew better, but I was at it for like a good 10 seconds before I stop. I'm like, hang on. No, you know better. You can be better than this. So it's totally fair and reasonable that we have clients that do the same shit and don't know that they're doing it, because it's a super easy trap to fall into, especially with young dogs.
When you said, how bad is it when you catch yourself? I don't think it's bad when you catch yourself. I think it's great when you catch yourself. It's bad when you don't catch yourself, when you find that you're perpetuating this long term and you're allowing dogs to exhibit these unwanted or starting to form these little shaping and chaining programs that they're pre-installing in themselves through our unintentional behaviors. Those things are bad. You know, when I see things like that happen, then I'm starting to think, oh, that's really bad that I allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
When I reflect on my lifestyle of the way that I raise and train my own dogs is I allow my dogs to do things that other trainers suggest don't do. You know, like I do training inside with my dogs. I do things where other people say, no, don't do that. You should have downtime with your dogs. For my situation versus their situation, it's different. So I would totally agree that some people shouldn't be doing what I'm doing or shouldn't be allowing what I'm allowing to happen, because I'm fully prepared to live with the consequences of what my dogs do. As we've reflected on before, you have a training series that you do called the pros and cons of living with your dog, like lifestyle with your dog. Things that if you want to do this is very much the cause and effect of what happens. That sort of advice is sage advice for people, because our lifestyles and our way of raising and our way of living is all different. You know, there was a time where I was very templated as a dog trainer, where I believed that, no, you must do it this way because this is what the book says. Because I had a playbook and what I was doing and saying to people, and it wasn't that it was as rigid as I was making it out to be. I've got to be honest, my initiation into training at the time was incredible. It was terrific. I was being schooled by people who went out and learned from other people. They weren't just living in their own little bubble thinking, no, we only do it this way and we don't take any external influences at all. We do it the way that we do it. So the playbook that I made was my playbook. I started to think, no, this is the way it's got to be done. I've got to hardline the way that people train their dogs, and it's got to be very templated. It wasn't until I started really figuring it out, and it was good that I was going and visiting other people, because then I was thinking, oh, this lifestyle is very much different than mine, and the characteristics and temperament type of this dog is very different from my dog and very different from the dogs that I'm used to seeing coming to training. So why would I have incredible restrictions when all I'm doing is curbing a lot of fun that people are actually having with their dogs? There were times as a trainer, and this is why predominantly the message that I'm trying to underscore in this conversation is there were times as a trainer that you've got to really examine how much joy you're robbing from people's lives by making things textbook when that's not what they called you out for. What they called you out for was to analyze their living situation and how things are in their homes. So there have been times where I've seen looseness with dogs and puppies where I've had to tidy it right up. I've had to say to people, is this what you want? Because this is the pathway that's happening here. This is the trajectory that we're seeing this young dog. The evolution that's going to happen from here is quite potentially this. I'm only saying potential because I'm not saying absolutely. But what I can see as an educated person who's had experience with thousands of dogs, this is where this is going to escalate to. Is that what you want? And then they say, well, no, not really. And I'll say, good. Here are some suggestions. What do you think about this? Because your puppy owners and your clients, the people that you're consulting with or that they're coming to you to be consulted, you're in a conversation with them. It's not a dictatorship. You can be very flexible about what actually happens there. For people who are sport-minded people, they tend to get very boxed into what their ideal of a dog is. And then when they start to venture out from that with different breeds and different types of dogs and different living situations, they are very limited in the way that they're thinking. Let's take, for example, something completely different from dogs for a period of time, and let's talk about NASCAR. With NASCAR, it's a type of car that you need to race. It's a type of engine that's suitable for that track. There's a standard that would only be acceptable and successful for racing in NASCAR. So if somebody turned up with a completely different type of car, then everybody would be going, what the fuck is going on here? This isn't NASCAR. This isn't what we do. And that's what happens with some sporting type of people or even law enforcement type of people, because they're used to dealing with that type of dog and that type of template. So when it changes for them, when they decide, oh, I want to do some supplementary work, I want to get into the pet dog market, like I need to improve my income, their advice for pet dog people sometimes isn't all that great. It's very polarizing sometimes when they go around there, or even when it is for a working breed with a working person in a working home. It could be that it's not the breed that they're used to working with. It's not the temperament that they understand and have studied religiously and the bloodline that they know all that well. So some people, albeit they are very good trainers and they are very good at getting what they need to get out of dogs, you put a spanner in their works and you put a breed that they're not used to working with, and suddenly their education looks very dim. They don't look all that competent. They don't look all that capable. And there are probably times where you could accuse them of being a little bit lazy in their studies of knowing about those other dogs. So then they suddenly form a little bit of a bias towards that person or even that breed of dog, where they say, this dog's a shit dog. It's not doing what it should be doing. I actually did hear Jerry talking in Controlled Aggression a while ago, where he was giving a bit of a slap to the side of a head of decoys and training people who are saying sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes you're not the person who is stepping up to the plate and actually, realigning your skill sets to understand how different breeds work, how different temperaments work, how different ages of the dogs affect them differently. Getting back to one of the points that I really wanted to make about all of this, if people are in your sporting dog club, for example, coming to you and saying to you as a training director and a decoy, hey, I'm having a lot of problems with my dog at home. My dog is doing a lot of behaviors that, quite frankly, I find are completely unacceptable, such as mouthing me extremely hard, or it's redirecting onto me when we're playing. They're red flags for you. They're things that you've got to not ignore or not say, just ignore it, it's going to go away. There are times where those things don't go away and they escalate into some pretty severe problems. Because you've got to also remember, although some of these people, they're not incompetent people, they're not stupid people, they're not incapable people. It's just that they don't understand this very behavior that they have right here. I used Harley as an example before. He was a hard dog to measure any of my other dogs up to because Harley could adapt so well, and he was almost like the perfect dog that I've had. And I just didn't know it. I was so inexperienced and so young in my training trajectory and career with him. I kind of thought, well, this is what dogs should do. This is what a dog is. Harley was an amazing dog. He was incredible. He was dog aggressive. He adapted very easy. He wasn't perfect. I'm not trying to make him out that he should be sainted or anything like that. Like, he had his flaws. He had his difficulties and things that we had to work on, both he and I. But he was much, much easier than a lot of the other dogs I've raised and trained over the years. Like, he loved work, and he had this, it was kind of like he had this symbiosis with me where we could almost, and I know this sounds very ethereal, but we're almost having telepathy between us where we could just bond together, and he understood me and I understood him very, very well. And again, like I'm professing here, he wasn't perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. He was an amazing dog and I really appreciate him. But then I'd get other dogs that I'd just think, okay, well, you're going to template into my life the way Harley did. And that was very much a downfall, and that was a mistake I made, and that disrespected my other dogs that came into the house. What I needed to do, and what I advise other people to do, is just say, who are you? What are you about? Let's focus on who you are and what I need to do to nurture certain behaviors in you and course correct others that aren't so appropriate at the time. And it's that course correction that allows you to develop some of the best traits in your dog, because then you can call on your experiences, or even if there are shortfalls in your experience, you can call on other mentors in the industry, people that you're training with, your colleagues, for example, people down at your clubs. The array of brilliance online these days, you can instantly access people and do consults with them at the drop of a hat's notice. That didn't exist when I came. I know I've said that till the cows came home. We're so fortunate. We're also unfortunate where there's a lot of people who are inexperienced and will give it a go. I don't want to go up in a helicopter or get surgery by somebody who's just enthusiastic and wants to give it a go. I want to know that the person I'm training
and
with
was sick of their corporate career. That's the ones in the dog training world that we get. Oh, I was sick of my corporate career. I've decided to do this. It's like, hey man, there's a learning curve to this. So you don't just get to walk straight in.
That's such a good point. And that's where people really need to ask some questions of the person that they're training with. Like, tell me a little bit about your background. Just because you seem nice, you got a nice smile and you're a happy, upbeat sort of person, are you really the best person who's going to bring out the best in my dog or be able to deal with this array of problems that I'm coming up against? Because there's a lot of people that are getting advice who are then coming to people like you and me. It doesn't necessarily mean it's you or me, but they're coming to you or me, and we might be their second, third, fourth, fifth trainer down the track, where they're kind of telling you the advice that they're being given. It's not that it's terrible advice. It's just immature advice for the time. It's advice that you would start off in training and you'd sort of work the playbook from there. Or there's just shit advice. There's people that have given absolutely woeful advice at those points in time. Like I've spoken to people and said, all right, you've had that advice and you've worked on that. How's that playing out for you? Like, where are we on the timeline of where your dog is actually going now? Are you happy with the way things are playing out? And I'm guessing no, because you're reaching out to other trainers. You've had multiple lessons with people. You've come to me or another trainer. It clearly isn't going to where you think it should be. What about we try something completely different? It's not to say there are people that have come to me before where it's not to say that I'm going to be the end for them and the best advice they've had. Because sometimes, even though I might give them great advice, their ears might be deaf to it at the time. There's been people I've had lessons with before, and you can just tell they're completely distracted on the other end. And there have been times where I've said, are you listening to what I'm saying? Or is this just word salad here? Like these are things where you should be taking notes and you actually have to go out and try this sort of stuff. It's not a quick fix. It's not just one of those pills that you can take and suddenly the symptom is just going to go away. These are like most beneficial properties where it's taken a long time for these behaviors to be ingrained. It ain't going away. There is no magic reset button here. There's nothing that you can do that's just going to make this completely go away unless you do something completely off the rails. And we've talked about the terms of crushing dogs before, where people have given advice like that, where they've got to the point where they're saying you have to literally destroy the temperament and nature of the dog now, make the dog so afraid to breathe anymore that it doesn't want to do those sort of things. And that's where people think that magic button exists. But thank God, there's people like us out in the communities who are saying, you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. Those sort of people are very old school, poorly and misrepresented type of people. They are not the type of people that you want to go around where you're helicopter spinning your dog and bouncing it off walls in your house and then putting that up on social media for people to marvel at. Like, this was my dog before, and thanks to this insidious, cruel person, this is my dog now who sits on its bed and it's too afraid to get up.
Yeah, that's the problem. I want to ask you some more questions and circle back around to tough dogs, but it is worth just teasing out a little bit. I think that it is interesting how difficult some people find it to actually find a quality trainer. Like if you're not in the industry and you don't know anyone, right? Like you've just got a dog, or you watch John Wick and you decided you wanted to get a biting dog, like whatever, however you come into it, you might have a problem dog or you just want to do cool stuff with your dog. I think that we as people who know where those places are, right? Like kind of throughout most of the world, I can kind of point you to the people who are there that are the legit people that can help you, right? Like I get inquiries because like people listen to this show and from my Instagram, like I get inquiries for in-person training from all around the world. Surprisingly, I'm usually able to put people in contact with someone who's within a few hours of them.
Yeah, perfect.
I'll never forget one time I was I had a consult here with this couple, and they were Indian, and they jokingly said something about they were in Australia on like working visas and they were going to be here a long time. They got a dog. And they jokingly said to me, oh, you don't know any good dog trainers in India, do you? We've got friends that are having issues. And I was like, yeah, what part of India? And right there on the spot, like I was able to sort of connect with the PSA community there, speak to the people and be like, hey, pet dog stuff, who's in this area? And within 10 minutes had a pretty good referral for them for exactly what they wanted. And I think that we kind of take for granted how easy that is for us to do, right? And I think that what I've certainly seen is a lot of people who have had a lot of difficulty finding a competent dog trainer for a lot of reasons. I think that we have a huge skill set, within our profession. There's people who are fantastic and world-class people that nobody's heard of because they're not looking for that kind of profile. They're doing their job each day. They're not actually looking to teach other trainers or anything. So why would another trainer have heard of them? I know plenty of trainers like that who are very busy doing just their own business. They're not interested in being a known trainer, having a profile, speaking on a podcast. They're too busy actually training people's dogs.
Absolutely.
We know them, and it's really hard to get in touch with those people, right? But they exist. But similarly, people who are just sick of their corporate career, have had dogs their whole life, have had well-behaved dogs of their own, have probably maybe been in a local obedience club at some point in their life, or they had a parent that was a professional of some kind or whatever, and have just decided in their late 50s, I'm doing the sea change. I'm leaving my corporate. I'm not happy with that. I'm going to take up dog training. And a lot of those people then we see like a very low skill set, right? And they don't know that. Like they're usually pretty open to the idea of getting better, but they just don't know that they aren't that good because they're not part of the community. They don't see any other trainers. They blame dogs. They blame the handlers for all of the lack of success that they get. So something I think it's just worth noting. I'm sympathetic to how difficult it can be to source a quality trainer no matter what it is you want to do. Take, for example, here where we're at in Sydney, or even let's talk greater New South Wales. Say you decide you want to get into some sort of protection sport, or maybe not even, you want a protection dog. The number of people who are highly skilled and competent at that are probably, I can count them on one hand.
100%.
Right? And they're busy. The people who are good at it are busy. They're not necessarily only doing that kind of thing. They're doing other things within their businesses. And similarly, I think a lot of people, certainly myself, are kind of cautious who they do that kind of thing for. Like I tend not to work in the protection dog space too much. I certainly have in the past, but I have found myself in the past sort of been like, oh, I don't like the person I'm training this dog for. Like I don't necessarily think that they're a very responsible dog owner, right? Let alone a person that I should teach this dog how to solve problems with their teeth. And so I don't, right? But then I get inquiries all the time from people saying like, I've just got this dog. It's 11 months old, pointy-eared shepherd of whatever kind, and I'm really struggling to find someone who can help me do the bite work. And like I get it because it's hard, right? Like it's hard to find people, and even for people like you and I, like we're lucky we have each other and our network in our life, but to find another decoy to work your dog, to show them certain pictures or to give it like a specialist piece. Like, I've talked about it plenty of times. Like I'm not great at finishing a dog, like bringing the real oomph, that final bit of like unleashing the realness in it. That's not my greatest skill set. So I rely on other people to do that for me. And so, like it can be tricky maintaining those relationships, staying in, like with those people. I get it, right? It can be difficult to find good trainers for the average pet dog owner. It can be very difficult to find. And usually we talk about look at their reviews, look at their website and all that kind of stuff. But more often than not, the people who are the worst are the ones that have the best marketing. That's a different skill set altogether. So like looking at people's reviews doesn't mean that they're a quality trainer in any way, shape or form.
You can buy reviews now. Like you can AI buy. Yeah. There's products online now where you look at the reviews and they are all manufactured. They're all made up.
Yeah, well, I mean, for people listening, you should know that we get at least once a week an email from someone who's offering to flood all the podcast platforms with positive reviews of our show. Like that's a service that you can engage. That's why we ask people for reviews, because we're obviously not going to do that. We're not going to get fake reviews, but you sort of get left behind a little bit by the people that do. And that's a different skill set in and of itself. Like I don't even have a page, like my business doesn't even have a page that can be reviewed. That's not something that mine's a word of mouth business. The sort of person that's going to look up, I need a dog trainer in my area that can do the things that I want to do and then are looking for reviews. I don't want those people getting in touch with me anyway. I prefer the referrals and how they work for myself.
And we're not at the stage where we can offer dog training and OnlyFans on a parallel as well to up our likes and shares.
Exactly. I think that that's worth putting out there. But I did want to circle back around because we were talking about tough dogs. And I wanted, for someone in your position, right, like you identify as a specialist in aggression cases. Within the work that you do at your company now, have been fortunate enough to be able to cycle around to get back onto the tools a fair bit and get to actually deal with people who have registered dangerous dogs or are looking down the barrel of that, like who are, have dogs that have actually done the things that warrant being called dangerous or are accused of doing it. How often do you think people turn up with it in mind that they have a tough dog, right? Like this problem dog. And so we're not talking about bite sport people or real protection work people. We're talking about people who have essentially through either their own experience or what they've been told by the trainers that preceded you, that this is a very tough dog and is evidenced by the way that he bit this person, bark, lunge, growls at everybody, won't let people into your home, blah, blah, blah. What do you reckon the stats is on people coming to you saying, I have this toughness in my dog,
and leaving having learned I have a very fearful dog that I need to help get through these difficult situations?
That's a really good question. I'd have to say the vast majority now of people that are turning up are very confused about what's actually going on because it's a side of a behavior that they didn't understand that their dog possessed. The majority of people, sadly, these days are for dogs that are showing aggression to other animals, not even dogs, like cats and rabbits and so forth like that, which it's still written into the act. It's still a problem. It's still a control issue that people have to face. But a lot of times that I'm getting aggressive issues to resolve, it's that type of dog. That's really a large part of my market of dogs coming in. I would have to roll back time and say there was time when I was doing aggressive dog consults and a lot in Victoria where people were very confused about what a tough dog was. And they were telling me that the dog was very alpha and very dominant. And naturally, when you would spend enough time with them, you would reveal to them it's not actually alpha and dominant. It's a very defensive dog that you've got. It's a dog that's very afraid of the world, and its methodology in thinking, well, I need to present a certain type of imagery here to keep myself safe from people because it's working and now it's been rewarded. It's paid off for me. People run away from me when I behave like this. So there's a great payoff for behaving this way. Those conversations are absolutely imperative, like they're gold to have with people. That's a part of the conversation I really enjoy happening, is not destroying their belief system or their understanding of what their dog is, but recreating what their belief system and their knowledge about what their dog is and who their dog actually is and what we actually need to course correct that. Because I think course correction is a really important one when we've got the possibility of a potentially dangerous dog there. I'm not seeing a lot of dogs that are truly dangerous dogs. I'm seeing dogs that are mildly dangerous. But nonetheless, again, when we start talking about the pathway or the trajectory, when you're examining that, there is potential for that to accelerate into a problem where a mildly or a somewhat aggressive dog can then turn into, after a reward cycle has been offered on multiple times, and that dog now is getting older and more experience under its legs, it now really has become a problematic dog. So it's great that people are seeing me more in the earlier stages where I used to see a lot of dogs really in the late stages where the dog was very set with the behavior that it manifested over a period of time. With truly aggressive dogs, when you have a dog that's really set in its aggression and it's not afraid of you, it's not afraid of other people, it's not afraid of the environment, but it understands, like, I can really fuck you up. That type of dog and that type of person, it's almost like an anomaly, but it does exist. When you do and are confronted by that type of person or that type of dog, sometimes you've got to be in a position where it could be the fight of your life or you could be fighting for your life. That type of dog isn't trying to scare you away. That type of dog or that type of person won't talk themselves up. They won't be shouting. They won't be yelling. They won't be putting on a grand performance. They will literally just come over and light you up. There is no warning about what's going to happen. And those dogs, thank God they're rare, but they're out there for sure, and they're incredibly dangerous dogs. And this is why people get bitten by these dogs or even terminated by these types of dogs, like they're killed by these types of dogs because there was no warning. They're right. They didn't see it coming. Even though there were cues, there's always cues, but the person's not educated enough to know it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the days where I did work in security. I remember there was a guy that was working with the company once, and he was a good doorman, a very good cooler. He was great at talking to people. He had a real good gift of the gab, and he could really talk some situations down, but he just wasn't experienced with truly hard people. And there was a situation one night where he was trying to cool this situation, and he was trying to use jokes and he was trying to use like a little bit of de-escalating techniques to calm down this guy. And I had to come and step in and move him away. I let the guy go into the venue and he said, "Hey man, what are you doing? Why'd you let him go in the venue?" I said, "Dude, it's like the Kenny Rogers song. You got to know when to hold him and know when to fold him. Like, that guy will fucking destroy you. He is fucking seconds away from turning you into a living person to a dead person." And he goes, "Oh, no, I had it under control. I said, "Buddy, let me just tell you, you got to know that some of these situations, you've got to know how to tactfully step in. It's not always about ejecting people. It's not always about using de-escalation techniques. Sometimes you've just got to know when you're outgunned." You've talked about these sort of situations before when you've been in the presence of truly omnipresent personality. where you know that you are outclassed by that person. You know that that person is no longer just somebody that you can negotiate with or talk them down. Sometimes you've got to realize that the best path is no path. Like you just let it slide. Get out of the way. Let it slide. And it's not that this guy, when he came into the venue, that he did anything wrong. The issue was the venue was full. They legitimately did have a function on. The venue was full, but I knew who this guy was. I knew who he was in the area. I know who he was by reputation. And I pulled my colleague aside and I said to him, this is the situation. This is how real this situation really is. And he said, I didn't know. And I said, exactly. You didn't know. And I said, unless I had time on the street and I was working with these people and understood this, I wouldn't know either. I slide that over into the dogscape with people before because there's been plenty of times where people have attempted to do certain type of corrective or resolution type of behaviors with dogs. And I said, don't step into this dog. You're not prepared for it. You're not ready. And it's not a slide on them. I'm not trying to say you're not capable of being a good enough dog trainer to deal with this. What I'm saying is you're not ready now. Let's talk about right now in this present moment. You're not ready for this. Like you don't have enough experience. You haven't worked with enough mildly problematic dogs or intermediate problematic dogs to take on this Moby Dick, because he will become your Moby Dick and he will kill both of you. In resolving this, both of you will perish. It will be a terrible situation. And I've seen that before. I've talked about in past episodes where colleagues of mine have stepped into certain situations before, and it's been the last time that they've ever been involved in dog training. You know, some people have lost digits off their fingers. Some people have irreversible damage to parts of their body. Some people have scars on their face. They've got to look in the mirror for the rest of their life because they stepped into a situation that they're just not ready for. And this is why I'm critical of trainers out there in sporting clubs as well as people who are involved in pet dog training. If people are coming to you and telling you that they've got a legitimate problem, step into their life a little bit more, examine it. Don't just dismiss them and say, it's not that and I wouldn't go about dealing with this. You're not talking about your own dog, bro. You're talking about your client's dog. Like, get out of your fucking ego, get out of your comfort space. Listen to what this person's got to say, because you don't want to fucking find out that in the next couple of weeks that person has been submitted to emergency or worse with them or one of their kids or the neighbor or another dog or something like that. You can still give people stellar advice and shit can go down. As I indicated before, dogs are not robotic. They're not inanimate objects that you just park and set and forget them. They're thinking about things all the time. Unless they're asleep, when they're awake and they're doing something, they're very much like us. They're plotting, they're planning, they're thinking, they're trying to make their life better. And sometimes violence is the answer to them. They think violence is the answer. Violence is the key. Violence makes me feel good. Violence resolves a lot of my issues. It fills up space, or even drive. You know, even for dogs with huge predation outcomes, the answer is put my teeth into something. This makes me feel good. It offers me the relief that I need today because I'm not feeling relieved. I'm not feeling fulfilled. I need to do something and I need to find the answer, and you need to work with me on this. And some people just don't know the type of dog they've got because they're not long enough exposed to the realities of who they are as a handler. That's another thing that needs to be addressed is, who are you as a handler? It's okay to admit your faults. It's okay to admit your limitations. It's okay to say, I don't know enough yet. That means that you've also got to have a mentor that's big enough and good enough in their skill set to say, I know who you are and I know where you want to go with this and I can help you get there. But trust me, there's some work to be done here. And there's some caveats to put in place here to make sure that the dog understands what to do, you understand what to do, and you're advocating for your client, you're advocating for your dog, and you're teaching them how to advocate as well. Because advocacy is very much a big role play in how we get some dynamic outcomes here.
I know we're a little bit broken records. I still have to say it. I think that for people who deal in aggressive dogs, there is so much to learn from getting in a bite suit and working with an aggressive dog without trying to stop that aggression, right? Like just getting to see it in full power. it's one of the things that worries me so much about with so many bite sports kind of dying and being made illegal or just restrictive to the point where people won't do it so much. That will have quite long lasting and far reaching effects in that often the people who are the best at dealing with real aggression and coming into people's homes and helping them fix aggressive issues in their dogs and can do that safely without the dog having to face massive, dangerous corrections, and also the dog not being put in a position where it can bite a person. And like, I think that's one of the things that when I'm having a whinge about other trainers, one of the things that gives me the ick is that people that put a dog in a position, that dog right now is a dog that bark, lunge, growls and will bite someone if he gets the chance, but hasn't yet. And if you put yourself in a position and get bitten by that dog, now that dog is a dog that has bit someone and has a bite history. And now that's a very different, it's still the same dog, but administratively, we now have a very different problem on our hands than we did when it was a dog who could maybe do that versus a dog who has done it now. So I kind of get the ick with people who allow themselves to be bitten or make mistakes that allow the dog to bite someone, be it them or somebody else.
Absolutely. I'm total agreement with you there.
Yeah. The main sign that I think you get to see when you spend some time in a bite suit is loading. So, when we talk about reading body language, so few people can read body language. And it wasn't inherent to me. I didn't come out of the box knowing how to read a dog with a great level of detail. It took a lot of time, a lot of learning from other people and a lot of observation and a lot of sort of seeing, okay, that's how the dog looks now. What is going to happen, right? And finding out what happens. Most trainers can see aggression. Most trainers can see fear. Most trainers can sort of identify a dog that's shut down. Most trainers can identify a dog that's happy and excited and repetitive arousal. But I think one of the precursors to aggression that we often don't see, or not many people get to see it, they're often the people that then say the bite came from nowhere, right? Like the aggressive bite came from nowhere, is a dog that's loading. Like a dog that is deciding, hey, I'm only going to take this for another moment or two and then I'm going to bite you. That tensing of the body, it's sometimes like a narrowing of the vision, closing of the jaw. It's that precursor that we see every time a dog's in a guard. This is high on my mind at the moment because with the two dogs me and Jazz have, we're sort of at the point now where I was handling them last night because my shoulder's banged up, so someone else was working them. And I've got one of the dogs in the guard and he's still learning to guard. So he's dirty, he's rebiting and that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that we're working on. And you can really see one of the dogs is pretty serious and he loads, right? Like you can see him as he comes out of the guard. If the decoy makes eye contact with him, he carries a decent amount of hatred in his heart. He starts like loading and I can see the tension go from his mouth to his tail. It starts like he closes his mouth, his vision narrows, his loose and sort of happy body. It just very subtly, not and suddenly, but it goes rigid throughout. And then he bites like straight away without permission. He's dirty in the guard at that time. Now, I knew that was coming. I watched the load move throughout his entire body. The decoy knew it was coming because we've seen this a million times and we're fully protected so that when he does tag, it's like, hey, don't do that. You're not allowed to do that. You don't get the outcome that you're looking for. You get told not to. You get brought back into that position. That happened to you at like a 2-second point. We're going to let you bite at this time at 2 seconds, but we're going to try and push you to 2.5 next time and then 3 seconds. And then, once we got 5, we've got 100, right? Like you've learned to settle yourself into them. We've got it. But that's one of the things that I don't think many people get to see. And that's usually from a tough dog because that's not a behavior that happens as a reaction to something, right? Like that's a dog that is tolerating something and then gets to the point where he's like, hey, I can't tolerate this anymore. I'm going to take action against this versus a dog that's fearful and is just sort of barking, bouncing around and really obvious cause and effect. Like you do this, I do this, and it's very pronounced. I think that's what we don't often get to see, but we see it all the time. That's something that anybody who's ever spent any time working dogs, teaching them to bite, has seen that a million times of that dog that just goes like, hey, I can't be in this position for much longer before I have to take action. And that action eventually happens. That's what I feel like. How can you teach someone that without seeing it? How can you learn what that looks like without having looked into the eyes of the dog while it happens? And if that happens to you for realsies outside the bite suit, you ain't probably getting another chance to do that, right? Like you're going to remember what that looked like, but you're probably not working any more dogs after that.
One of your best teachers in life is going to be experience for sure. As part of my career evolution, one of the things that I've been doing this religiously as I've had this career with pet resorts and canine evolution and so forth is I educate all of the new staff because it's a job that relies on a lot of casual staff coming through for holiday periods, mainly young ladies that are coming into the job space. So we have a night usually where they come here at Dural or I go to the location that they're at because we've got multiple locations now. The question that I often get asked by the time I've done my presentation or we've done something where we're working with dogs or talking about restraint techniques is, how do you know this? Like, how did you come to understand this? And I've just said to them, it's experience. It's all experience. It's only by making a lot of mistakes or being incrementally held back by people who I trust to say, don't step into this situation yet. Observe me, watch me, let me show you my experience so then I can share it with you on how to do it, but don't do it yet. There was a dog at one of our locations that bit several of our staff. He probably shouldn't have been there at all. And when they called me down and they showed me some videos of what he was doing, I said, yep, call the owners. He's got to go. He's not welcome to stay there. He's going to continue to bite stuff and it's only going to escalate because now he's getting better at what he's doing. So I went down there. I put the bite suit on. I went down there with a slip lead and they said, are you going to go in with him? And I said, yeah, what can he do to me? The worst that's going to happen is I'm going to get a bruise out of it. I walked into the pen with him. The dog's, he came over, tagged me a couple of times and then he looked at me and went, oh shit. Because I'm just standing there looking at him. And then he basically went, I surrender. And I slipped the slip lead around his head and I dragged him out there and I threw him in the owner's car. I didn't even have to hurt the dog. Like, people were saying to me, what's going to happen? Are you going to have to, get in there and wrestle with him or anything like that? And I said, most likely not. Yeah, this dog's a biter for sure, but he's not the dog that you think he is. He's in a situation where flight has been taken away from him. He's in a small pen area. He's afraid. He's nervous. He's actually a bit of a coward. He wants to bite because he thinks that's the ultimate outlet and that's going to reward him and get him to stop feeling the tension and the stress that he's feeling. So, yeah, once I take all that away from him and show him his only option is to just walk out there peacefully with him, he's going to do that. It took me no more than 2 minutes from the entire time that I walked into the pen with him, got bitten a couple of times with him. Now, had I walked in bare skin, I probably could have fended the dog and used a bed, and which I've done in other situations where I've just used a dog bed and just fended the dog off, slipped the lead around the dog's head, put the bed down and just walked out with the dog. I probably could have done that. But because of the size of the pen, it was a bit smaller. My options were lower. So I thought, I'll just chuck the suit on. I walked in, he bit me in the leg, he bit me in the torso. He then sat there and looked at me, and that's when he went, oh, I give up. It's like hitting somebody with your best 1-2 shot and they just look at you and, just shake their head and go, nah, man. And you go, oh, fuck, this is going to be a hard one. And that's what he did. He went, I've just went through my playbook. It's not going to work. What are we doing now? Slipped the lead on, walked him into the car, 2 minutes tops. It took him to do that. The questions that staff had for me, because I said, film it, let's show other staff. They said to me, were you scared? And I said, absolutely not. There's nothing to be scared of in those sort of situations. Cautious? Absolutely. Always cautious. I'm always role-playing in my head what could go wrong. My hands are somewhat exposed. My feet are exposed. My face is exposed. Just because I'm in a bite suit, it doesn't mean I'm bulletproof. It doesn't mean things can't go wrong. It doesn't mean the dog can't grab me in the leg and pull me over on a slippery floor. I've got to role-play these things. I've got to think about these sort of things as I'm going into these dangerous situations. It's like you, Pat, like when you're a soldier, even though you're trained and you've had years of preparation work, like when you're going into real combat, I haven't done that before. I've been in combative situations where I've dealt with people on street situations and it's still dangerous and still my life is threatening, but you've got to keep your head on a swivel all the time. I'm not having people trying to pop me off or detonate explosives around me, when I'm on job sites doing security. I've got people that might want to knife me or very unlikely, but I have had guns pulled on me in sort of situations like that. But it's very, 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 very unlikely that those sort of things are going to happen. Am I going to get involved in fisticuffs? Well, that could potentially happen any night that I'm out on the job. So you gotta weigh up what's going to happen and how you work in those sort of situations. And it's only experience that's going to teach you who is my adversary in this situation and what are their capabilities, and most importantly, what are mine? What do I bring to the table here, and what can I do to resolve this situation with the least amount of problematic behaviors and outcomes that I can manifest? And that only comes down to good experience. But even with that good experience, still shit can go sideways. Things can go wrong. The best people are people that don't panic in those sort of situations. Like even in life-threatening or harrowing situations, they have enough tenacity and fortitude to think into my experience. There's that great saying is you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. That started with Archilochus, who was the original Greek philosopher that came up with that quote. It came from him, and it's evolved into a training platform from everybody into military and police to people doing first aid on other people. Like, you need to understand that your training and your experiences are the things that's going to be recalled on in those sort of situations. There was one night I was standing at a door at a pub and I was the doorman, and a guy came in and he was getting very mouthy and I was de-escalating, and I thought he's going to throw a punch. I could see it coming. I was role playing and I could sort of see that this was going to happen. And he did. He threw a right cross at me and I blocked him. I just literally pushed it across. Another guy came to my aid and we wrestled him down and called the police, and the police came and arrested him for assault. My colleague said to me, goes, "Fuck, dude, that was a hell of a block." And I said, "Mate, I've been training for that. For 10 years of my life, I've been training for that sort of situation." And he goes, "Does it always work?" And I said, "Hell no. I've been punched in the face before." Like there have been times where you don't see the punch coming, or you're too distracted, or you're not thinking about it, or you're inexperienced. You just don't see it coming. And it happens. And I said, but that one time I was planning, he's going to punch me. He's not backing down. He's not playing my game. In that situation, I was able to resolve it. If you ask me if I've been bitten by dogs before, of course I have. I've got a limb on my body that doesn't have a scar on it from a dog bite. Like my shins have got holes in them, my calves have got holes in them, my quads have got holes in them, my hands have got holes in them. And it's not terrible. Like I've got very soft and very bruisable skin and very soft skin. When you look at them, you kind of go, oh, they're not really bad. They're not really bad because I haven't put myself in a situation where they could be really bad. Like there have been situations that have blown up around me where I've been lucky to get out of them, where I've looked at my other colleagues and they've got really bad scars on their body. They've got really sad stories to talk about it because they weren't as prepared, or it was an unfortunate thing that happened in an unfortunate time where it was the perfect storm. It was just that perfect time. So you can't always be ready all the time for everything that life is going to throw at you. But if you don't have the experience, if you don't have the importance of fortitude and education, that's going to make it far more worse for you. Because when I see people in those sort of situations without the education, without the training, they do panic and the situation becomes a lot worse. And it becomes not only more dangerous for them, it becomes more dangerous for, God forbid, the people that are around them as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I reckon that's it.
Yeah.
Another episode. Canine Paradigm. As always, if you like what you hear, just like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you notice from. Or we'll buy those fucking likes and shares and subscribes. We'll buy them. We'll buy those. We'll buy it.
Will we?
We'll buy them. We'll get 10 billion fucking positive reviews. No one can stop us. No, we can't be bothered doing that.
I like reading through what our legit listeners write. It's nice. Right. It's really nice.
If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is jump into Patreon. A few bucks a month to get you a giant backlog of information as well as new stuff going forward. But you're supporting the show, keeping us being able to make this and getting us the best gear to be able to continue to do it.
Especially with our terrible falling dollar at the moment. Fucking hell, it's at an all-time low.
Pathetic.
That's a good point. At the moment, our cash reserves are in the toilet.
Yeah, the world's a mess.
It is.
But if you got some money to spare, flick it to us. You get stuff for it. You give $10 a month, you get a live stream with me. I'm all excited about that one. I just uploaded the next one. It's going to be 9th of January. I'm very excited. But,
what's it about? Tell us. Give us a preview. What's it about?
Oh, well, the live streams are Q&As.
Oh, yeah, nice.
People just ask questions. They submit questions. It goes in through Patreon. I put the post into there. People submit them, and then I just sit here and drink coffee with people and answer questions for a few.
Yeah.
Fun. I like doing it.
Yeah.
But another way you could support the show is to get into spring. Get yourself some T-shirt, a hoodie, a giant wall tapestry, all kinds of stuff. You could be repping our merch to your friends.
Love it.
If you want to get in contact with us, best way to do that is to jump into the Facebook discussion group. There's a lot of cool conversations going on in there. Try to stay in the loop about what's going on in our industry. That's a cool place to do it.
And experienced people.
Yeah. There's actually some incredible advice that gets given away in there. It's fantastic. I love that group. Or if you want to get in touch with us directly, shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Love you all. Goodbye.
Oh,